There were moments when I longed for non-magical means of interplanetary travel. Even with mental preparation, the unsettling sensation of stepping from one world directly onto another was nearly unbearable. The profound sense of wrongness made me question my decision to become a monster hunter. Yet, the honor of completing the Academy's rigorous training and joining the esteemed ranks of guardians who defended civilization from the dangers of the untamed lands was too great to ignore. What was making me reconsider my career path was the fact that the master I would be studying under had decided my first hunt in the field would be an angry mind-eater. Even veterans of 100 hunts thought twice about taking on one of the eldritch beings, and I was being thrown at it before the ink on my diploma had even dried. As if that was not bad enough, I wasn't even granted my request to study under another elf elementalist. Instead, I now found myself studying under a human telekinetic. Not only were we different species, which meant that he would have difficulty guiding my magic, we didn't even belong to the same discipline. I had nothing against humans or telekinetics, but it was like asking an electrician to teach a plumber. There was next to no overlap. However, I didn't get this far by having a closed mind. If it didn't work out, I'm sure I could request a transfer to a different master. "Riddle me this, tall guy," the human in question said as the taxi we were in drove down the bumpy street out of the city. "Let's say the planets align just right and a drake from Grunghold ends up riding an unexpected transit all the way out to Sha in the dead of winter. Naturally, it seeks out the warmest place it can find, which turns out to be a large bakery. Now, how does the greatest monster hunter of the century take down this scaled creature?" I pursed my lips as I tried to recall if I had read about that particular exploit, but for the life of me I couldn't. Just 2 weeks ago I hadn't even heard of the human, but ever since he had chosen me as an understudy I had been digging up as much as I could on Lee Jones. Now I knew pretty much the same as I did when I started. He was a very private person, but not without accomplishments. For one, not only did he have an exceptionally strong claim to being the greatest hunter alive, but he also carried the recommendation of Ryland Flynn, who praised him as one of the most talented magic users she had ever met in her 200 years. That was a high compliment, especially for someone as closed off to the winds of magic as a human. The fact that someone as allegedly talented as Lee could have so little fame was baffling. On Lee's left hand was the primary symbol of the closed circle, and the secondary symbol of the broken circle was on his right. It was odd that he put the primary sigil on his offhand, especially a defensive sigil like the closed circle. Humans had naturally high resistance to casting and being affected by magic, so it was not as if Lee needed any extra protection. The broken circle didn't give me any hints to how he did it either. Telekinetics typically went for sigils that allowed to draw upon more magic, rather than one that made it easier to overcome defenses. Unless he had some elf blood in him, I doubted he had the ability to throw a drake around. "Sorry, I don't know how you did it," I admit with a hint of shame. "How did you use telekinesis to take down a drake?" "Before I answer that, how would you do it?" Lee asked, leaning forward in interest. "If you're going to be training under me, I want to see how you think." Truth be told, I was still surprised that he had chosen me as his apprentice. Everyone in the class had been shocked when they found a human monster hunter would be taking on a journeyman, and when the rumors around Lee started swirling, it was not long before everyone was wondering who he would choose. And now I was riding in a taxi to an old mansion that had been overtaken by a mind-eater, trying not to let the fact that my first hunt would be to track down a creature that could overwhelm a small army on its own distract me from the first proper question that Lee had asked me. I thought for a moment. There were many ways to take down a drake, but most of them required lots of help, lots of fighting, and lots of luck. I would get some storing rings charged up with as many ice spells as I can cast. When the drake is sleeping, I release the charges on the rings and try and drop the drake to sub-zero as quickly as I could. Maybe see if I could get some liquid nitrogen from the local university to help. After that, some enchanted cold iron could hold it until the next transit to Grunghold. The human nodded along as I explained my plan. "Sounds good to me. Minimal risk if you can figure out when the drake is sleeping, and with enough prep you should be able to put it into hibernation before it can strike back. One problem though, storing rings are expensive to buy, and you need at least an hour to charge each one. Not very good if it's an unexpected situation with a time limit. You're the greatest monster hunter of a generation, according to some. Surely you would have access to the funds to buy a load of rings. Lee let out a massive laugh. Kid, you're not a real hunter until you blow all your money on equipment you might never need. See this Otto's taker? He pulled back his cloak to reveal what looked like a miniature crossbow holding a silver-tipped wooden stake. Cost me 600 gold. My mouth dropped open. 600 gold? But why? I thought you didn't even like taking out contracts on vampires. It was 40% off. Lee protested. I can't turn down a deal like that. One of my friends is a vampire, and even she bought an Otto's taker. Apparently it's wonderful for keeping the family gatherings under control. Well then, when I'm a fully fledged hunter I will learn from you and keep my finances under control. You say that now, but the merchants in the guild could sell holy water to a demon. One actually did. Anyway, how did you take down that drake? Use the broken circle to break its grounding and throw it outside into the cold? Maybe he did have the ability. It was unlikely, but if the Ryland said he was one of the most talented spellslingers she had ever met, then I wouldn't put it past him to be a magical outlier. Ha! I'm not that strong, Lee said. Well, there went that theory. I'm not a big fan of flashy displays of power. Precision is much more fun. Take a look. He pulled out a straw from the large pack sitting between his legs and put it in my hands. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and made a small gesture with his right hand. I could feel his magic slipping through my natural defenses, as the broken circle glowed slightly, and the straw was pinched, as though by invisible fingers. Is that it? I asked, disappointed. Pinching a straw? Lee grinned. How about you try it then? He took the straw back and held it in his open palm. Even though I was an elementalist, I still had some minor telekinetic experience, surely enough to pinch a straw. I closed my eyes and reached out with my mind, finding this straw even through the haze of his body resistance. With some effort, I sent the smallest smidgen of power out to the straw and opened my eyes. The straw was crumpled up into a minuscule ball. I did not mean to do that, I said. Nothing I do takes a lot of magic, but it is very difficult to restrain yourself so much, Lee said, shoving the crumpled straw into a pocket. Word of advice for you, don't try and light any cigars with your magic. Easy way to lose some eyebrows. Can you just tell me how you took down the drake? I asked, trying to steer the conversation back on topic. I smashed the windows of the building open with a rock I found. The drake retreated into the inner rooms, where it was warmer, and then I walked right to where the building administrator's office was. And then do you know what I did? Lee paused for effect. I turned the thermostat down. Way down. Thanks to the weather, it took about 10 minutes for the entire place to get below zero, and boom. Drake's sound asleep. No magic, no effort. I didn't even see the beast until after the fact. Took me half an hour in total, and I got paid a nice sum of 500 gold. Quick, easy, safe, efficient. That's it? I asked, in disbelief. You just turned off the heating? And smashed a few windows open, that bit's important too. I just stared at him as the cab pulled up to an ancient house that looked like it needed a demolition crew rather than a pair of hunters. At the minimum, a groundskeeper could probably do something about the forest encroaching on it. As soon as the door was opened, a wall of dread hit me as the Mind-Eater's aura settled over us like a damp blanket. Pushing the terror down, I looked back to see Lee hauling his massive backpack of gear out of the cab. My satchel seemed woefully inadequate next to all that equipment, and I still could not quite think of the right words to say. So I settled on the first thing that came to mind, which was probably not the best choice. You're the best monster hunter? I said in disbelief. The most talented mage Ryland Flynn ever met? Lee chuckled as he started rifling through his pack of supplies, emptying a veritable mountain of knickknacks and devices whose purpose I could only guess at. There's your first lesson as my journeyman. Do you know how Brunhan Ironback dealt with her contracts? She summons a golem. If that doesn't work, she summons more and more until she overwhelms the target. Same goes for most of the rest of my peers. They are all linear thinkers. No technique, no imagination, they just keep throwing magic at the problem until something breaks. They are strong enough mages that they can afford that. Me? I barely come up to their knees. In their own words, I am the stiff breeze of magic. I watched with interest as Lee pulled out a pair of silver halos inscribed with a series of runes. He tossed me one as he shoved all his equipment back into the bag. So why is it that I am the best and they aren't? It's because limitations force me to be smarter. I'm talented in a very narrow field, but with a bit of ingenuity that is nothing. Brunhan would have thrown a dozen golems at that drake, and would have totaled the entire neighborhood subduing it. All strength, no finesse. When it comes to a mansion with a bloodthirsty mind-eater inside, she would do much the same. Holding one of the halos over his left hand, Lee made the sign of warding and the closed circle glowed with power. The Rylan called me the most talented mage she ever met, not because I could throw her would-be assassin 100 paces, but because I stopped him dead with a flick of the wrist. Someone tried to kill the Rylan? I asked in shock. She had never made mention of it in all the times I had talked to her. What did you do? Another wicked smile from Lee. It's simple. I pinched a vein in the assassin's head. My eyes widened in shock. How? How could you overwhelm his defenses? It was inconceivable. Even with the elves' natural openness to the winds of magic, it was all but impossible for someone to interact directly on a body. Even the greatest telekinetics merely used their powers on the target's clothing, rather than the person themselves. Broken circle, my friend. Such a small usage of magic power combined with that sigil is enough to slip under even a well-warded human's defenses. It takes too much time and effort to set up comprehensive barriers against every conceivable avenue of attack. Plenty of people don't even use wards and just contract a biomancer to boost their body for a few hours. The halo sparked with golden light, and Lee placed it on his head before repeating the process for the one he gave me. It took me 15 years before I was good enough to do that, but it has paid dividends, Lee continued, twisting his wrist as he made a series of signs. When you only have a single trick, you need to learn how to get mileage out of it. That's why I'm the best, because unlike everyone else I think laterally. I choose the winding path that takes you around the roadblock. I tackle the problem from unexpected angles. Rig the deck. Take every advantage I see, and then make a few more. The second halo popped into life and I put it on my head. The second as the silver touched my skull I felt a sense of claustrophobia settle around me, as though window I didn't know was open had just been closed. But you chose me as your apprentice, I said, as I adjusted the halo into a more comfortable position. Why? You didn't have to take anyone on. Because I looked at your test results, and I saw a spark of potential in there, Lee said, standing up straight to look at the overgrown mansion. You've got the power of an elf, and with a bit of guidance I can see you going far. Come on, tall guy, let me show you how a human hunts some monsters. A guttural roar came from deep within the mansion as the great beast finally noticed our presence. Waves of terror crashed over me as the psychic might threatened to overwhelm the barriers of the halos. It was like a hurricane, threatening to throw me back to the road if I faltered for a single second, and Lee didn't even break stride. Thoughts of the beast ripping apart my memories as my body rotted filled my mind as the lessons from the academy came flooding back. Lee must have seen my nervousness. Relax, friend, he said with a smile. It's just a full-grown mind-eater. Its main prey is people without imagination. We'll be done in a half hour. He was right, of course.